Welcome to another installment of the forum. I'm here with Jason Tang and Anthony Panke. Today we're going to talk about immigration, not just in the US, but also in Europe. On both sides of the Atlantic, it's a very big topic. It decides elections pretty much every time. It's a very complicated issue because it's complicated for practical reasons, but obviously also for moral reasons. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation, I think. For those who haven't been with us the last couple of times, what we're trying to do here is to sort of illustrate how we can have democratic debates, right, in a time of very intense polarization. So what we're doing kind of on purpose at times is also to play devil's advocate or do what people call steelman's arguments. So we're trying to take a maybe contrarian position and defend it and see how well we can defend that position for the sake of argument, literally. In order to show that we can have these difficult debates and still do so in a civil and respectful manner. So without further ado, I think we should get started. Immigration right now is not in the headlines. Those are dominated obviously by Iran and the corresponding external shocks that are caused by this conflict in the Middle East. But until very recently, the spotlight was on the actions of ICE and the Trump administration's effort to sort of arrest and deport illegal immigrants in the United States. This was obviously very controversial to the point where even Trump supporters were voicing their discontent with the measures and the way those measures were taken by the Trump administration. So maybe this is a good way to start the conversation, and then I want us to talk about immigration more generally. So let's start with you, Anthony. You live on the West Coast. How have you experienced those months of ICE? I don't even know what to call it. Actions.
Yeah, it's tough to say because US, it's very strange because ICE is a federal police force. So that means it's odd, and I'm not sure how it translates to different states. France, I know that France has a similar kind of police force that deals with immigration. I'm not sure about CRS, I think is the name for it in France. But in the US, ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, is created after the September 11th attacks and so on. It's directly responsible to the president. And so the president can say, stop arresting people or arrest everybody who does not have status. That's the thing that's particular about ICE. And then the states, they don't really have much power over what ICE does. So they can't stop ICE. Now, what they can do is make ICE's job, they can work with ICE. Like they can actually do ICE's job, like local law enforcement, which is at the county level. They can actually work, they can arrest people for ICE, or they can refuse to. And so in California, you can look at different coast to coast. Florida has total collaboration. Every local law enforcement agency, including the Department of Agriculture and all these other agencies, they all collaborate with ICE. So that means that if they have any reason to believe someone is undocumented or is an illegal immigrant, they will take them into custody. California, no law enforcement has that power. So, but ICE is still here, and they are arresting people. And so that's what you see with Los Angeles, where Trump sends in ICE and then Customs and Border Patrol. He can do that. So that's kind of what we're dealing with.
Just a quick follow-up on this, and thanks for explaining actually where ICE is coming from, what it's supposed to do and what not, and the sort of weird situation in the United States. We're going to talk about Europe in a minute, but for now, for the two of you, the question is, the way we experienced it here in Germany through the media. I mean, most of us haven't been in the United States. It looked really scary, right? It looked really frightening. Obviously, and obviously there were also people shot, not immigrants or illegal immigrants, but people who tried to sort of stop ICE. How did you experience it personally? What did you actually notice this? Did you talk to people about it? I mean, let's start with Jason and then move to Anthony.
Yeah. New York is a little weird in the sense because Mamdani has like a very, very, very good relationship with Trump. So like it's one of those weird like odd couple things. So like there were ICE protests, but as like there hasn't been like the kind of same level of crackdown you see in Minnesota, obviously, and stuff like that. Like as far as like, I mean, I don't think it's a big secret that America is, especially for a developed country, like fairly violent, like both from like a public order point of view as well as kind of the homicides and that sort of thing. And it's just kind of like, I mean, spats over immigration unfortunately, I mean, it's just been part of our fabric. From we go through stages where we're like super anti-immigration to pro-immigration, and even the side switch, right? It can be the left against immigration, it can be the right against immigration. We can go into a little bit of that later too. But it was not always the case that it was like right wing was anti-immigration, and it wasn't even that long ago.
Anthony Wolf.
I have family in Minnesota, so I have family impacted in different ways. I know people who were at the protests, people who not at the protests where people were killed, but definitely who were at the memorials and so on afterwards. And so I can tell you that there's like the violence. Well, you saw 2 people were killed, and those killings were done. Like the people who were killed were doing what around the country in many cities are doing is these they're essentially doing, sometimes they're called constitutional observers, or they've been trained in like how to interact with ICE and how to identify them. And those groups of people have been around for, I mean, I honestly did that work 20 years ago in Minnesota when I lived there. So those actions are super common. And I did this when the George Bush administration was in power, after the Iraq War, so 2005, 2006. And so, I mean, I can tell you that what's happened with Trump and so on is an escalation, like more. But what's happening is, and the way that immigration tends to treat immigrants is not, it's kind of like this. Like at the border, it has been violent. Like it's routinely violent. It's just that they've killed citizens this time.
Okay. Do you, I mean, as far as I can, or as far as I could observe, part of the problem seems to have been that there were a lot of new people recruited into ICE. They got a lot of money to basically build up their manpower. And in this case, I would stick with manpower because the Trump administration wanted to sort of make a big point. And I mean, the way Jason has written an article about this on the sort of wrestling style of Trump politics, it always looks very, very scary, and it also does hurt. But so they always want to make a big splash, right? Do you think, because at some point Trump then told them to back off, right? So do you think they overplayed their hand there, or was this really intentional up to this point?
I think Noam has not, Christy Noam, sorry, like the former head of ICE. I think she's former head now, right? Or like
DHS.
DHS, yeah. Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, she has not showered herself in glory. She was definitely like, and it's just one of those things where it's like, there's just clearly been a feud from both like Hanman, who's like, yeah, and Noam. They just have not run their ship well. Like, regardless of whether or not, like, whatever you think of like their kind of like their approach, like I don't think anybody can argue that this is like a very well run oiled machine. It's just been it's been sort of disaster after disaster. So like we'll see if the new guy was Mark I forgot his name, Mark something or the other.
Mark Vane, or what's his name? Yeah, Mark Vane.
Mark Vane, yeah. I mean, technically speaking, I guess he is actually the most heritage American you can get, like, but like because he's from the Cherokee Nation. But like it'll be interesting to see, yeah, like I mean whether we're going to see like kind of like a shift away from just like let's just like do all this the shock and awe, or move towards like to the original idea, which was like at the time the original pitch was that, oh, we're going to get rid of all the violent like criminals, which polls well and stuff like that, as opposed to kind of like running around to Home Depot and just like grabbing whoever looks vaguely Hispanic and putting them on the.
I would add that I think the problem is, so they hired a lot of people, but I'm pretty sure the people, so the two cases of people being killed in Minnesota, those people were actually people who have been in immigration enforcement for a long time. Like the person who killed Renee Good, he had been an agent for like 10 or 15 years. And then the second person, they said there's two people who have been identified as killing Alex Preddy. They also were CBP. That means that they're they're from Texas, I believe, and they had worked at the border. And I think the issue is there is an issue with training, but the deeper issue is that these agencies, they don't do patrols. It's like if you have a toothache, do you go to your mechanic? No, you go to the dentist. So what they're doing is they're sending people who don't do patrols to do patrols. And so they interpret a threat in a certain way, and then they do what you see. Like they hit people, they tear gas them. They're not trained in de-escalation. They're not trained in local law enforcement, and they have no connections to the community like local law enforcement. It's like based on trust. So is that by design? It could be, but then I don't know if they overplayed their hand, but it just spun out of control. I don't think they expected Minneapolis to have like a general strike. Like the city was shut down for an entire day. I don't think they were expecting that kind of reaction. And then they lost control of the narrative.
Okay. Well, then, actually, let's move to the issue of immigration in general. As I said in the opening, it's one of the issues that really is when elections do come up, all of a sudden everybody cares about immigration, and I think it's. I mean, we use it as a shorthand, but it's very important to sort of distinguish, or helpful, I think, for a discussion, to distinguish between legal and illegal immigration. Because a lot of people, including a lot of politicians and the media, like to sort of throw those two together and then confound the issue, right? And make it more obscure. We're celebrating, some are celebrating 250 years of the founding of the United States, and it's always been sort of talked about as an immigrant nation. When you talk about First Nation people, they would probably sort of chuckle at that or cry, but that's a different issue for now. The U.S. has a problem at the southern border that's pretty obvious because there's a lot of drugs coming in, but there's also a lot of illegal merchandise going south, right? Which is sort of, that seems to be a symbiotic sort of relationship. Guns are going south, drugs are coming up from the north. The Trump administration seems to have put on some pressure on Mexico. We've seen the results of that recently. In also questionable like actions, but how problematic is illegal immigration and how necessary is legal immigration? Basically, those are okay. That's a lot of stuff together. So let's start with legal immigration. Jason, you're always talking about the demographic development of countries around the world and the United States. That has been an issue. There was like, and Anthony probably remembers too. Samuel Huntington had something to say about that before he passed away into oblivion. But you want to say a couple of words about that and about the economic sort of significance of demographic changes?
Like, and actually I could see demographics actually playing a role from sort of like a left-wing argument against immigration. We can get into that later if you want, but like I think, but fundamentally, like immigration, like, okay, we don't have a good solution to stopping demographic decline, right? Like non-Hispanic whites have a higher birth rate than Mexicans do, which in America, even if you compare like America to Mexico, non-Hispanic whites have a higher birth rate than Mexicans do. And immigration is a stopgap solution to that for certain countries. right? Like Lee Kuan Yew, like not exactly a woke liberal, like famously said that, you know, like America's great strength is that it can draw in like 7 billion people. Reagan also famously said like, yeah, like, you know, like you can live in France and never be a Frenchman, but anybody can be an American. And but this idea of like immigration in America, it's always been controversial, right? Even like Ben Franklin like despaired of Germans ever becoming true Americans because they were just uncivilized barbarians, right? Like in was it this is failing my civics, but like the 14th Amendment after the Civil War was basically so probably late 1860s. We basically said, oh, we got to do something with these slaves, right? Like now that they're freed, what do we do? Because they're not citizens, so we'll make them all citizens. That led to a backlash in the 1880s. You know, when all the Chinese came in, they're like, wait a minute, all these Chinese people are going to become naturalized citizens. So the Chinese Exclusion Act, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. Like God forbid we had a Catholic as a president, JFK. And right now, yeah, we're just going through that phase where it's just, especially like, and it tends to, you know, whenever there's uncertainty, whenever things feel weird, but it's the same. I mean, the arguments are always the same, right? Fundamentally, they're like, they're taking our jobs, right? They're diluting our sort of like what it means to be American. Like these are all kind of like, and this is just kind of part of the process that we go through. It just it looks ugly because it is ugly, right? Democracies are ugly and messy, and like I'm sure like 50 or 60 years from now, it'll just be like a paragraph or two about how we went through this issue. And then we came up with this current system, which is currently failing. And we need a new approach. And it just feels worse because we're living through it. It's history, right? Like,
Anthony, do you want to?
I think it's tough because it's like illegal is essentially if you come without authorization, or if you come with authorization, like a visa, and then overstay your visa. And if you look at the history of laws, you mentioned the Chinese Exclusion Act. It has been this, like, how do we deal with what is legal immigration? You know, it's asylum. And that's a big part of the debate now, which we can talk about more in a second. But like the first immigration reform, if you want to say it, I think in the US was like 1798. It's like the Nationalization and Immigration Act, which basically says anybody who comes to the United States who stays for 5 years and is good moral person and white can become a citizen. That's the first essential classification for citizenship. And then, you know, at one point in time, actually in the US, now you have to be a citizen to vote. But at one point in time, you didn't have to be a citizen to vote. So you could and there's a long history of like the Irish coming to the United States, being in New York, and then voting and they're not being citizens. And also fighting in the war, Civil War. Like there's a long history of non-citizen voting in the United States, which is another interesting issue. So this question, and then, but now we have laws like, for example, the United States, when Bill Clinton was elected, you talk about left and right, Bill Clinton, Democrat, trying to be tough on crime. He passes what's called like the Illegal Immigration Reform Act, 1996. And essentially that act makes it such that if you come to this country without authorization, you're banned for 10 years. And if you come and leave and come back, both times without authorization, you are permanently banned from ever changing your immigration status in the United States. So that's pretty hardcore law, and it traps millions of people into a system where they can never change their status. That's and that's like part of the deal.
I would just add one other thing is that like a large, like one of the other big talking points is like that like anti-immigrant activists would you say is like, look, immigrants like drain from our social security net. This is kind of like a post New Deal thing, because prior to the New Deal, it was just like if you came as an immigrant like to America, that was just kind of like, I mean, if you didn't work, you just kind of like, yeah, that was the end of the story. So like part of it's also like a more modern thing, especially after World War II, when we started saying like, okay, we need to get rid of this like stateless person problem, because that was like a huge wreck. And the entire modern system is built around like, I mean, some of them are like the after effects of or the unintended consequences of stuff that we did after World War II, and like part of like, yeah, the Great Society and the New Deal and that sort of thing. And like it's trying to figure out like, well, okay, how do we balance those competing interests and issues?
Oh, okay. There's so many issues. So many.
Yeah. If it were easy, we would have had a solution already, right?
Real quick, that Anthony is being a super dad and rocking his baby, so nobody needs to be worried. He's not having a stroke or seizure.
Earthquake in Cali.
So, okay, let me pick up on a couple of things. Let's start with legal immigration. The one issue about or legal immigration or illegal immigration, people who are pro-immigration say, well, we do need immigrants in Western countries. Let's stick with that, in Europe and in the United States, because our birth rate is below one where we are sort of maintaining our population, and then we don't have enough workers. Now, let me just like throw this out there just for fun. If all these like knuckleheads like Sam Altman and Elon Musk are right, nobody needs to work anymore. So then shouldn't we just stop immigration completely?
I mean, when we get to that point, yes. But like obviously, like somebody's got to build the data centers. Like, you know, I ChatGPT ain't helping with that. Like
Elon Musk is building the robot army to do that.
Yeah, and like if we want to move it to make it like a less like, because like anytime you talk about America and H-1B visas, like there's an extent in a sense like to use a more neutral example, to move to like Singapore, for example, right? Like they like the H-1B visa idea. The conception is good. They just think the American implementation is absolutely insane. Like, because it shouldn't be a lottery. It should just be entirely merit-based. And that's their argument. Like, but like,
so flesh this out for us real quick. So yes, flesh it out.
Yeah, the Singapore argument, or just like the
like just, what's the idea behind the H-1B in general, and then how?
Well, I'm not sure about the entire history of it, but like,
right, no,
but like, but basically the idea is like, look, if we have like skilled, you know, like basically skilled people, right? We want the best and the brightest. We want them to come here and work here. But like right now, it's kind of like this weird lottery system that can be kind of gamed and kind of not. And then like we also say like, well, you know, some people we worried about the security risks and whatnot. Like the Singaporean approach has always been much more kind of like ruthless or mechanical in terms of like, they're just like, look, if you're like a PhD, right? We don't care, right? We're just gonna, you can be a Singaporean, we don't care, right? And that was just kind of like, so in a weird way, like they've taken kind of like part of the American model, like, but the problem is like, they've really only taken the H-1B model. Like there is no kind of like migrants, and that's not a thing that happens over there. Like, and it's interesting to see like how different countries try to take like, because in a sense, like America is a good baseline to take ideas from, because we've been dealing or struggling and screwing up and succeeding this issue for almost like 200 odd years, right? For a lot of these other countries, like Europe, you know, like the Middle East, like Japan and Korea, this is all very, very new to them. They have like, so they're trying to pick the best pieces of it, like leave aside like, and some of them are actually stealing stuff from the European migration model too, which I think is interesting.
But you mean that sort of Singapore, countries like that, they just like are actually able to not let anybody in.
Yeah, Singapore has the advantage of being small, right? Like, but also like it's small, expensive, and they're also very, very rigorous and like very kind of like they're actually militarized society as well, just because like you know the mandatory service and whatnot, and like they've always had this idea of being that like, look, we're going to be a small meritocracy. Like,
yeah, I think on tech, the thing that I think about farm workers, there's like 2.5 million people who are farm workers, milking cows, harvesting fruits and vegetables in the United States. Half of those people don't have documents. And so, and then if you're milking cows in the United States, then you most likely, I should say, there is no visa system for dairy workers in the United States. So if you are a dairy worker, chances are you're undocumented. That's the situation in the United States. And there is robotic milkers. There is robots on farms, but it's like 1-2% of farms have robotic milkers. So is technology going to get rid of immigrants? That's what like Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Rollins, that's what she said. And then you do have a guest worker program, the H-2A program, but it's at like 400,000 workers. There's just a huge gap like between, so in the farmers, I grew up on a farm. So like you're going to go to a farmer and say, buy robots. And right now the current status is like one robotic milking machine milks 40 cows. And the average dairy farm has a few hundred cows, or no, probably it depends on the area of the country you're in. In Wisconsin, a few hundred cows. You're going to need to invest in multiple robotic milkers. Who's paying for that? Like, so, and then farmers are going to be like, well, I can pay workers significantly less, even though they're undocumented. So I'm going to do that. So the tech angle, I don't think is gonna. I mean, maybe at some point they're talking about drone. I think there's some place in the Netherlands. There's like, I think is it the Netherlands? It's like one of the top 5 egg exporting countries in the world because of greenhouses, and part of that's robots. I think it's I forget the university, but they have extensive use of robots and technology. Now, I don't know if that'll happen in the United States.
So basically, the system is that we are getting cheaper milk and exploiting people for that cheaper milk.
Right. It ties in the left-wing argument against immigration.
And basically enticing them to cross the border illegally.
And the farmers support it. There's some farmers who go to abroad, and what happens is farmers will go abroad and they will find workers and they will make relationships with them. And they will say that they want a visa program. I know farmers who say we want visa programs for dairy workers. There's lots of legislation that would make that happen, but they don't have there's no political will to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So then what they do is their workers apply for jobs with fake social security numbers, like fake documents, and that takes the responsibility off of the farmer and puts it all on the worker. And that's what it is with construction and every other occupation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the only solution would be to make the milk more expensive, basically, right?
Yeah,
you mean
blanket amnesty, maybe. Like you'd have to.
If you give everybody status, is that if you give everybody status, like you give so like the last amnesty was 1986. It was Ronald Reagan, and there was 3 million people who were given status from that change. And from what I know, at least in agriculture, a lot of people, some people that I know, they got permanent residency. They never became citizens, but they got status, and they kept working in the fields, and they're just content doing it. So I don't know if it would. I don't know. It's a hard thing to say if it would impact the price of milk. Okay. If you give status to people.
Well, here's the thing. So during our trip across the United States, we talked to some people who were on the conservative side of things, who voted for Trump in 2016. Who said that the problem for them wasn't like immigration in general. It was illegal immigrants, because once they come into the country, they're illegal, and then they're prone to do illegal things, which that's a logic you have to sort of buy first. But the solution then would seem to be like, well, we do need farm workers. So yes, maybe just give them amnesty. Right, and then prevent illegal immigration, because we should talk also about the issues of illegal immigration. The problems are usually that are being discussed. But Jason, you seem like
I just want to say, like, the other thing is like as kind of like political parties have shift, like unions have moved far more to the Republicans than they used to be. Like the other thing is also is like, you find like there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment among like first generation immigrants, especially those who came in kind of like what they would so call like the appropriate path. And there's kind of a pushback there from them as well. And it's not like this. It's just this complicated thing where we have this like weird Rube Goldberg system for immigration, where people like are illegal because of like just weird bureaucratic oversight, right? Like, you know, like farm visas, and now they're kind of like in this weird odd place, and we're like, we can't decide what we want to do with them. And it's just much more useful for us to just kind of like blame the other side and kick the ball back and actually say like, okay, we need to sit down and have like a hard solution with actual trade-offs. It's much easier just to yell at the other side. And we have to wait till something breaks.
Yeah, I would say the one thing in your point about, I mean, there's really lots of research on this point that people who are in the country illegally commit crimes at lesser rates than native-born citizens.
Yeah.
So that premise is wrong. There's research even out of Texas, which has some of the most extensive collaboration between federal law enforcement and local police to arrest people. It's like it's like 60-70% of the people who have been recently. Texas has the most detentions, the most people who have been arrested, the most number of people than any other state in the country. Like 60-70% of those people have no violent criminal records, and I should say no criminal records at all. And if those who have criminal records, it's like driving without a license. And in this country, if you do not have a driver's license, and to apply in many places like Texas, to get a driver's license, you need to be a citizen. So if you don't have a driver's license and the police pick you up, they'll put you in jail and they will deport you.
Okay, well, I think it's good. It's good you're actually setting the record straight on that point. And maybe this is a point where, well, I will play devil's advocate and move to Europe for a moment, because in Europe we have in many ways, a very different situation. Let's take Germany. Actually, we are surrounded by lots and lots of countries. Europe in general has open borders. Still, and so there's immigrants coming in from the east, but also across the Mediterranean Ocean, which is really dangerous, and lots of people die there. We also have very different types of immigrants. Obviously, because of the war in the Ukraine, we have a lot of Ukrainians who came over. Oftentimes, they were doing a lot better financially and stuff. So, and they got support a lot easier than people who came as a result of the war in Afghanistan or in Iraq or Syria because of ISIS. But in Germany, people would say, well, so the sort of arguments generally against immigration, I guess both legally and illegal, is sort of they are a burden on the social security system. Right, and that was a big issue in Germany, also with Ukrainians, because there were cases reported, and I don't have numbers on that, and I think it's probably hard to get objective numbers, where people from Ukraine came, got unemployment benefits, and then went back to Ukraine. And there were like these scandalous videos on social media where they would do that in a BMW SUV, which obviously is like the perfect thing for the internet. The other argument is terrorism and crime. In the United States, that's more sort of related to drug cartels that are operating also in the United States. Here, the issue was more actual Islamic terrorism. And we did have some very terrible attacks, but I think if you look at them in the larger scheme of things, they're obviously they're not representative of the behavior of people who come here. The problem is obviously that terrorism, by definition, is an act that's supposed to scare people. It's supposed to be flashy. It's supposed to be on the news, and they manage that when somebody's on a fair and it's cutting people's throats, which happened here close to Cologne. That's obviously not good. We also have issues with crime, but actually those are often just people from Europe who've been here for a long time. But we also had the issue of culture. In the United States, I don't really see the culture. I mean, you are kind of taking pride in Texas too, and like a lot of lots of Americans speak Spanish. Here, I think the issue is harder. The divide is harder because you have the Islamic sort of aspect of it, and you have issues that are related to sort of Western culture, right? Respect for women, which really has been an issue here in Cologne. That's years ago, but that was sort of a very, very unfortunate example of this. How valid? I mean, yeah, I want to talk about push and pull factors in a minute, but how much do these reasons really weigh for you in your perspective?
The one thing I would add is like Europe pioneered like an immigration policy where like and it's I think the US started copying as well, but Europe pioneered the policy of basically paying third-party countries to keep immigrants over there. They didn't ask too many questions. They would just write them checks, right? Like Turkey, Morocco, do what you need to do. I don't want to know what you do, but you know, like make it happen. And the checks on me. And they've kind of pioneered that policy that's now been used by like several other countries. So like I guess that is an innovation of sorts. But
yes, real quick, just I want to give credit where credit is due, because Merkel, who in many ways was a very apt politician, she's been praised by a lot of people for her "we can do that, we can do it" sort of line. It was a sentence she said during the immigrant crisis of 2015. She's been also the prime person to offer money to other countries to keep their immigrants on their shores, right? So just to set that record straight too.
But
go ahead.
It's the same talking points, right? Like Europe's like you look at France, for example. Like France's pension system is going to be unsolvable, not because of immigrants per se, but because of the fact that like the average pensioner now makes more than like a working person, and that's just because like your demographics, like in most European countries, are pretty close to terminal. And like immigration can help plug that gap, but like there needs to be some sort of like either rational immigration policy or something, because like there's a difference between 8 and 1.6. Like it doesn't sound like a lot, but like in terms of like actual sustaining, like it's a difference between like a crash off a cliff in terms of like pension funding and that sort of stuff, or like kind of like a slow managed decline where you just kind of shove on more debt. And like right now, like I think immigrants in Europe especially make a great scapegoat, because like you're trying to do like 6 or 7 different things, right? You're trying to fight climate change. You're trying to build up a military after years of neglect. You're trying to support Ukraine. Something's got to give, right? You're trying to keep your budgets in check, right? Like something has to give somewhere. And like right now it's just like, well, it's just part of it's just like it's easy to blame. It's always been easy, right? Like I mean, it's been part of the American playbook for 200 plus years. Blame the outsider.
Just a quick interruption, but yeah, we're pretty much done with climate change, I think. So that issue has been taken off the table. So
I mean,
go ahead.
Demographics does, right? Like because in a democratic society, old people don't care because they'll be dead.
Yeah, but let me. So what you basically. Sorry, just one quick. What you're basically saying is that immigration doesn't make a huge difference with Social Security. The problem is somewhere else, right?
With Europe specifically, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Europe has other issues that are not related to like immigration.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple of things. I think the terrorism point. I mean, yesterday there was a naturalized Senegalese person who killed or tried to kill. It was at the some University of Virginia. I think he attacked. I forget what it was, but it was considered a terrorist attack. I think that's what people at least are saying. But this person had status. But even regardless of that, I don't see the similarity. Like at least, and now I'm not sure about exactly the laws in Europe, but criminal laws like murder and burglary and so on, they're not immigration related. They're just different things. Like I don't understand why they're equated. The second thing about culture, what I don't get, at least in Europe, is you have the Schengen Agreement. So you allow people who are Europeans to travel across borders. So you should probably restrict that, unless French people and Germans are the same, which they're not, I don't think. So why do you let Europeans travel and move around and non-Europeans? I don't get the culture argument.
Well, the culture argument there is the argument, I think it was the French president years ago, which was the argument for not letting Turkey into the EU, which was like Christian and non-Christian.
So is it Christianity? Is Christianity?
Yeah. Well, not even anymore, right? I mean, like
it's not just culture. Then it's not just like cult. I mean, because there's French culture, there's German culture. It's something beyond culture.
Well, but French and German culture, I mean, there's a historical connection that's a lot deeper than between people from Syria and Germany. So that would be the argument. So that was not but in general, it's a good point. All right, let's actually move just move to the maybe that makes it more clear. What are arguments? Why do people get status at the border, and why not? What are actually the legal arguments? Somebody shows up at the southern border, and it's not because he has a visa already. That's legal migrants or immigrants who come there because they already had a job. They went through the channels to get their respective work visa, or they go there to university like I did, and then they get their visa, which I don't know if I would still get that, but so that's one category. And then the other category is people who have, and there we actually enter the realm of international law to some extent. They have a proper reason to apply for entry into the country. What are those in the United States?
What are the rules for, what's the question again? Is it asylum specific or just migration? Because asylum, you can get status if you are a victim of domestic abuse. You can get status if you are from certain countries like that have, it's called TPS, temporary protected status. And those countries are going away. Biden opened up the number of countries that would offer that special status. And then special status basically means a work permit. That's all it means. So anyways, if you're a witness, if you're undocumented, asylum and get it because you're essentially, you've witnessed a crime and you're going to help the police and your life is in danger. So they'll give you status for that. It's called the U visa. The controversy in the US was that, especially during Biden, millions of people came to the United States without status and they applied for asylum, and Biden let them apply for asylum while being in the United States. And then the problem was that a lot of them were denied. And then what happens? They're still in the United States. So are you going to go pick them up? Are you going to arrest them? That's not going to go over very well. Or do you make them apply for asylum outside the United States, which is technically breaking international law and also domestic law because it is an international ratified treaty. So I don't know if that helps.
Jason, want to chip in or?
No, I mean, the only thing I want to say is like, it's just like a mess, right? Like it's kind of like this Kafka-esque like bureaucracy nightmare that leads to kind of like, you know, even if you're trying to do the right thing, you're still hosed, right? Like, and this makes the entire situation somewhat like faintly absurd, right? Again, like because the actual coming to solution is going to like, if we want to come to the solution, it's going to involve like just painful trade-offs that really, frankly, nobody wants to make right now. So like, again, like I think we're just going to have this kind of like psychodrama of just like yelling and screaming until something fundamental breaks. I don't know what it's going to be, but like that just is broadly how the democratic process seems to work, right? Like we just yell and scream at each other, nothing gets done, then something fundamental breaks and we're like, oh, we actually kind of have to do something about this thing. And then we come to some sort of agreement.
Well, I mean, my opinion is that it would help a great deal if we sort of clarify sort of the questions we're asking there. And that's why I'm trying to sort of move us to, let's say, you know, you have the H-1B1, that's actually pretty like non-controversial. Certain jobs are, well, yes, it has to be controversial, but this is what I mean. It's not controversial in the end. Germany does the same. We need certain types of people, jobs in Canada. If you're a tax consultant or a dentist, you do pretty much get a visa. It's not easy in Canada either, by the way. Yeah. Even though they always pretend they're so nice, but I don't know. And then I think the other category that's rather uncontroversial, it's people who are seeking asylum because they're they need to fear for their lives. I do think that's pretty one can actually.
Yeah.
Okay, go. What?
I would disagree with that. Like one because it's like you have stuff like trying to pass like a new national security law, right? Which fundamentally says that like one, like you're Chinese first, and then whatever citizenship you're second, right? So like seeking asylum, like let's say like I'm a dissident, I seek asylum in the United States. That's actually like from like there's an argument from the Chinese point of view that that's actually breaching China's sovereign law. Like that's a violation of like Chinese sovereign law. Like like, and you see them pursue dissidents like in like, you know, like say London, in the United States as well. Like, because as far as they're concerned, they're saying that like there is no right to asylum because you're Chinese first, right? You're Han first, right? Your obligation is
but why should the United States give a damn? That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, the United States doesn't give a damn, but smaller countries do, right? London.
No. But okay, but I'm asking. I'm trying to figure out if we maybe clarify sort of the categories, and that doesn't happen in the public discourse often, then maybe it gets a little bit, we can get a better handle on the question. Because if we have one question, those come, and now I don't care what the Chinese say about this. Sorry, no offense against the Chinese, but from the United States perspective, let's just take for a moment the idea that, okay, there are people who come from regions where their life is in danger, right? And they can show that their life is in danger. They have been persecuted or abused. Those, I think, are rather uncontroversial cases, even for people on the right, especially if you're Christian. I think they should be, right? Because it's sort of, that's the idea of asylum is rather uncontroversial, I think. The tricky group, and obviously the boundaries of those groups are very, very sort of murky. That's the problem. That's why the issue is so wonderful for politicians, are those who come because they face very difficult circumstances in the regions where they're coming from. My opinion in general is most people would love to not be refugees. They would love to stay in their countries, but they sometimes face such abject poverty or have no opportunities. And this is where we get into the pull and push factors, right? Push factors are when I live in a country, I'm 18 years old. I see that I will never make more than, let's say, $10 a month or so. I will never get out of my hut, quite literally. No offense. And then I see other countries where people have 2-3 cars and swim in money. And because everybody has a cell phone nowadays, I see that, right? So that's a push factor, right? And when they come, and the pull factor is obviously our wealth that we don't like to share very much, right? So that group is obviously, that's where it gets tricky, really tricky. But I think the others are not necessarily that difficult to decide upon.
How does that factor into your culture argument? Because it seems like that shouldn't matter. Like if culture trumps asylum, then you should reject everyone for the sake of culture. Doesn't matter if you have any valid excuse.
Well, first of all,
if you're non-Christian, you should be rejected. Period, because you're not Christian.
No, well, first of all, if you're really Christian, then you should also accept people who are not Christian. So I'm switching between arguments here, but the idea there is, and that's something that we've done a lot more stringently, or at least talked about a lot more stringently than in the US, is that people have to sort of commit to certain, they have to learn the language. They have to sort of, pledge allegiance, basically, to certain principles that are shared in our community. In Germany, I think they require something which I find rather, pretty intense, is they have to, I think they have to pledge that they accept the state of Israel, something. Because of a lot of refugees who come in who are anti-Israel. Supposedly that's making a difference. I don't see how that's making a difference. I don't see how standing in front of a bureaucrat and saying, yes, Israel super duper is going to help Israel and make you less of an anti-Semite when you are one. But hey, German government is always coming up with new clever ideas.
I think it's more of an excuse to kick you out, right? Just like those like TSA forms, it's like, are you a terrorist? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
nobody's going to take yes. I'm like,
But later, if they get you, then you're in legal trouble. And the legal trouble, this is something else. So yeah, we're also moving between the legal and the moral issues. But I absolutely see your point. I don't think the asylum case is easy, because you can always argue, well, but if you live in this part of Ukraine, you're totally fine. Yeah. Which is actually probably true. If you live in certain regions, you don't have to worry about anything. For us,
Trump had like white South Africaners. I think we gave them asylum, right? And that was a huge. And it feels like ages ago, but it wasn't that long ago. It was like a couple months ago. But that was a huge controversy, because they're like, wait, you have part of people saying, wait a minute, they're not really does anybody really believe that the white South Africaners are really oppressed? And you have other people saying that, well, asylum's asylum, right?
I guess the question is, where do they apply from? That's the thing. That's when people say open borders, open borders. That's the thing in the United States, was that people were applying for asylum essentially in the United States. And so then when you're denied, because most people are denied, then you're undocumented. Or then that's what gets Biden into all these problems. Because Biden then I'll give you parole in place, essentially giving people parole, gives people a work permit, kind of like a very odd status where you get a work permit, but there's people from like Nicaragua, people who probably have claims, but they can't prove them. But they were applying for asylum in the United States, or actually, and so like what some reforms do now is they say you have to apply outside the United States. But then it's like, that's a problem, because like if you're in a country where they want to kill you, you don't have a year to wait.
Right. I mean, we have a similar issue here in Germany where I think Chancellor Merz also tried to do that people, because, I mean, let's be honest, there's also people who do take advantage of that gap. I mean, yeah. I would too, probably, if I were them, right? But the thing is, yeah.
Also in Germany, or in Europe, don't you have people who are like coming, like the biggest immigrant receiving countries is what? Greece, Italy, Spain, places where people don't want to go. They're like, we want to get into Europe, but we want to be in Germany. It's like, well, who's crossing a land border or an ocean border into Germany? Nobody directly. Nobody is. They have to cross multiple states. So what do you do with that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is why Germany is trying to keep them, not let them into Greece in the first place. So that's why we pay Turkey to make sure of that, right? And Italy. And the Italians are more than happy to put them on a train. They actually pay for the ticket and send them up north.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so good for them, yeah.
Which is lovely. I do think that there is a lot of. I would have to look it up. But everybody nowadays can look up those numbers themselves by asking one of those weird chatbots. But my assumption would be that we have more refugees, a higher percentage here than other countries, or higher total number, not percentage, because
in Germany.
Yes.
In Germany. Yeah. I think that's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay, well, I want to not go over an hour, but what would be the moral argument for completely open borders? You just get rid of the borders.
Moral or instrumental argument, I guess.
Moral.
We're all people, I guess.
Yeah, you know.
What?
We're all people, so I guess people are people. Let people move. Migration is normal, so people say too.
Yeah.
Like people came to the United States, they crossed the Bering Strait a million years ago, or not that long, but thousands of years ago, people came. Migration is normal. That's the way. That's what people say. It's like the straight up, I think, open border promotion people. That's what they say.
And the libertarian argument would probably be something along the lines of like, look, this is just like another constraint of government on rights. It's arbitrary, and like anytime you do, you end up with these kind of like weird Kafka situations that we have right now, where you're like, well, I'm illegal, but I'm legal, and I have no pathway to legality, and like I have no idea what the hell's going on. Like it just becomes like this arbitrary exercise in kind of like violence.
Okay, let me do the argument against though. You've been working. It doesn't matter what color your skin is or whatever, in a place, you've been paying like a lot of taxes. You're trying to get your kids through school. You have 3 of them. And then hundreds of thousands of people are coming in, and we need to build houses for them, like we actually had to do in Germany. Not great ones, by the way, but they get... let's actually take the case I've talked to. Afghani people have been here. They've been living in barracks since 2015. Ukrainians come in, and boom, they get apartments. And for the Afghani people, very difficult to swallow that, right? To be like, that's okay. Is it really just that somebody? I mean, I can say, okay, it is really too bad, and I think we should. We haven't really talked about the push factors in a way that I wanted to, which is that maybe our Western countries, we're responsible for a lot of the miserable conditions those countries are in the global south or east or wherever we want to say. But is it really fair? Let's say you are running a country, it's your responsibility to protect sort of the interests of those people, then to say like, okay, we're letting everybody in and your tax is going to pay for the houses of all those people.
Yeah.
Let's just make it into very simple argument. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, is this where I want to make the left-wing argument against immigration? Like,
I don't know. I want you this argument.
Well, yeah, I would actually frame it like a different way. I would say like you can approach it like right now, yeah, yes, like immigration is like a right-wing thing, like, or at least it's coded right-wing, however you want to describe it. Like, if at some point it flips, and it will flip eventually because that's just how these things work. Like, I can see a left-wing argument arguing that basically like immigration fundamentally is basically like it's basically a form of like neo-slavery or neo colonialism, right? Because what are you doing, right? You have all these educated people, right? Literally the best and the brightest from these developing countries that put in the money and the resources to develop these people. Then we take them over to our society, indoctrinate them into our kind of like Western understanding of the world, right? Like, you know, and it's just like literally like an extension of like if you take like the argument of like Project 1619 seriously, right? That like what this is like it's just again a further extension of kind of like this Western hegemony, Western thought, like by indoctrinating them into our system, right? We're taking their doctors, right? Like the doctors come from Syria and whatnot, right? We're putting them into our system, right? We're depressing wages of people, you know, within our society, right? So we can have like, you know, more widgets or more what have you, right? And we're also depriving those countries which need them, right? Just further sort of like increase our hegemony, and like that is a fundamentally immoral thing, right? Because it's an immoral project. It just sounds nicer because we're saying, oh, it's immigration, it's asylum, we're doing them a favor, when all it is just like colonialism under a different name.
Yeah, there's this right wing, the Edmund Burke. He has the right wing anti-colonial argument from a couple hundred years ago, which is kind of like, leave people alone. Why are we engaging in these ventures in other places? And it's like partly cultural, but it's also national. Like, look, there's different nations, and that's a good thing. Like, pluralism depends on different people. And if you're taking people, or people are leaving to join your group, then you're weakening other groups. With your housing argument, though, are you kind of saying that immigrants are a drain on resources? Is that right? Is that the argument?
Yes. The argument I tried to build there, apparently not so successfully, is to say like, okay, if we completely open the border and say everybody can come, those people need to be housed, they need to be fed, they come with no resources themselves, so we need to use, we actually had that issue here in Germany. I mean, this is what really got the debate started in Germany, not necessarily the terror ones. We have had terrorism since 9/11 in Germany, in Europe in general, but the issue has really been in Cologne. I've sat in meetings where the representative, and I'm not going to say who it was because then I get in trouble, but they basically said we have no single spot anymore to put anybody. And we're basically housing them in hotel, and they filled hotels with them, and they paid them huge sums of money to sort of house these people. And that's when that came out. Obviously, people here were very sort of were like, wait, how is this possible? And how can you justify this? Especially when a lot of those people are trying to sort of take advantage of the system and blah, 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 blah. So if you open the borders completely and then say everybody who come basically, then that's going to be a problem that's going to be like multiplied manifold.
I think you have this, like, in the US, I mean, there's a parallel, but it's like the argument people make for just social assistance in general. Like, you give people assistance to housing or give people jobs, they don't work for it, they're never gonna work. Like, that's what people say against homelessness. It's undignified. I mean, that's like maybe a somewhat of a conservative take on this. Like, if you just give people homes rather than having them pay for them, if you get people on a path they can buy their home, then they'll probably take care of it more. If you're just giving things away, then they're not going to care for those things. So you shouldn't give it to not just immigrants, but anyone.
Yeah.
It'd be better. I think that So that's probably the
But
best thing to do is send them back home.
Let me push this a little. Yes, but for now we do have, for better or worse, and a lot of people don't like it, but we still do live on a globe with a international system with nation states. So again, otherwise we wouldn't need any elections, right? And we elect people who represent us, and then a government that is supposed to first and foremost protect us, and sort of secure our well-being. So if that's the case, then yes, we take care of people who are nationals basically first. That's the nationalism argument against immigration.
Yeah, that's always been, like, it's kind of, you either have to go like full utopia, like in terms of like, hey, like we're people first, right? Like, but fundamentally that doesn't really like, that hasn't been a compelling argument, I guess, for most people anywhere. And this like whole like giving out like like benefits is not like a left wing or right wing thing either, right? Xi Jinping has famously said that like like he's terrified of this idea of welfareism, right? Which sounds odd coming from like a communist country, but like his argument is both like one, it makes people lazy, and two, like we can't afford it, right? Like because nobody's working, and then like like who's going to pay the taxes? Who's going to do the things that need to be done?
Right.
Yeah. So your argument is why should what's exactly the argument? Like
I'm making the argument
nationals or citizens.
I'm making the argument against open borders.
Yeah.
For the sake of
I guess from an economic perspective, it eventually balances itself out. Because okay, let's say hypothetically, the United States just says like, okay, free for all, right? We'll open our borders, everyone comes in. If you come in, we'll build your house, right? Eventually, it'll just tank our GDP to the point that nobody will be interested in coming in. So.
Yeah, but that's why I'm saying the moral argument. Can you really justify this, especially if you're the government, to your own citizens? Do you think it's fair? Because the person who wants to go to school, maybe, who cannot go to school then anymore, or to a very nice, expensive university, it's not her fault that she was born at that moment in time when the United States decided to give it a free-for-all. That's why I'm saying it's a moral issue too. It's not just an economic issue or a question of instrumentality, right?
Well, I guess if we go back to maybe we can say that. Oh, go ahead.
I would say that maybe if you want to talk about your borders, I guess a moral argument against the border or in favor of open borders. I mean, you look at Germany. Germany's a new state. Your borders have changed a lot in the last 150 years. So whose borders, where the borders change. So I don't know why you're defending those borders, the borders that exist now. In the U.S. particularly, you look at the United States, it was born out of 13 tiny little colonies, and it extended. The borders of the U.S. extended through war and conquest, and a lot of the settlers were illegal. They would squat on land that's native held or held by other countries like Spain or France, and then they made the U.S. come and take that land. So the settlers are illegal. Your ancestors, not you here, but like people who are probably saying kick out those other people, you could be like, well, your ancestors probably were illegal immigrants too. That's what maybe I'm against the border. Borders change, so why are you so into borders?
Well, because again, that girl who just was born, it's not her fault that the borders were or that the country was taken. So the moral argument, I don't think hinges on that. Of course, yeah, you stole the country from the people living there. That's you can say nationalism in general is never justified. None of the borders are. That's what Alex Wendover said. He made that. I think it was a exam question. Like when you look at planet Earth, you don't see any borders, right? So why are they so? But the fact is, sovereignty is very, very real. And it comes with a lot of benefits. That's why people want to come over here. That's why the Palestinians want to have a state. That's why the Kurds want to have a state, because it comes with a lot of benefits. And if you would actually dissolve or not live in the United States, and you're lucky, and I'm lucky I was born here, then you might have very adverse circumstances for the rest of your life. That's not fair. That's not fair. Absolutely. But is it because that's not fair? Is it therefore morally okay to tell that girl who wants to go to university that she can't do this because now all the 2 billion people on the planet who live in really, really bad circumstances are invited to come in.
Mm-hmm. The first part of your question probably needs to be addressed then, because the question of fairness, if you did nothing to get status and you have status, then what authority do you have to judge somebody who's trying to get status? You've done nothing. You said you're born here, you've done nothing. So you, like, I don't know, like maybe like that seems to be an issue. Like, you've done nothing to.
Well, I said that. I said that that's maybe not a fair system, but that's the system we're living in.
Right. But like morality, like shouldn't, like, theoretically, like, again, if you go back to like the idea that, like, well, you know, that's the way things are. That's not like an argument. It's just simply, that just means that that's the way things are, right? Like, there's no argument to say that, like, it's not a priori clear that, like, from a sort of universalist point of view, that, like, being a citizen of a nation grants you any additional moral rights over, like, a non-citizen, right? So I'm like, and that's probably where the, like, I mean, if you just say, like, okay, like, that's just the way things are, right? Like, to use like a more controversial, well, you know, slavery used to be commonplace. It's just the way things are, right? You know, you're a slave, that's your life, right? Sorry, sucks to be you. Like,
absolutely,
and
no.
like, yes. We could Starship Troopers it, right? Like, you know, everybody's familiar with Starship Troopers, right? Citizen required, demand service. Maybe that's the future. I don't know.
No, I and maybe I'm not making a good Steelman argument, because there is an argument. It's not, obviously, it's a question, is it fair? No, it was luck, pure luck, sort of the lottery that you were born there and not somewhere else, right? But then does it make it fair to strip those opportunities from somebody who actually also, it wasn't her fault to be born in that country? That's the question, right? So that's a very different, like, because, I mean, I'm sorry, but to say, like, well, all borders are arbitrary and unfair isn't really getting us anywhere either, to be honest. Then we should just all give it up. And I bet you none of us will do that. Because.
But why are you defending them? Why are you defending them?
Because I'm trying to make an argument for.
I mean, if it's power, if it's power, it's power. Then that's not a moral argument. It's just like, you want force.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a moral
argument. Yeah, it could just be like, I want cheap labor. Like, I want.
No, the moral argument wasn't just like, oh, just take it. The moral argument was about the person who's born in a wealthy country.
Yeah,
and that's not justified, or she didn't do anything to deserve that. Yes, but it's also morally not okay to just, like, take everything away from her.
Well, no, I mean, you can make a utilitarian argument too, right? Where it's say, like, okay, maybe she doesn't end up being, like, you know, like a movie writer, she ends up being a barista or something else like that, right? But if in the same time we raise 5 or 6 people from, like, an impoverished country that would otherwise have died of young childhood diseases, is that a worthy trade-off? Well, I mean, it seems like on balance, like, maybe that's not such a bad trade-off, right? Like, that's just, like, the math works.
I don't see. I mean, the example in Germany, are they kicking people out of? Are they kicking Germans out of their homes to house Afghan refugees? Is that what's going on?
No, the argument is that
that's what your example was. That's what your example was. Like, you lose something.
No, don't misrepresent my example. I didn't say that.
Is that what you said? I thought it was zero sum in your case.
No, the point is that government tax money was used in order to pay for hotels for refugees. And because a lot of this is incompetence of the German bureaucracy, and was, like, overburdened with the sudden influx of thousands, and in 2015, same story, like, millions of refugees. The thing is, you can make another argument there that it was backfired really badly, right? Yeah. And but then it gets tricky again. It's just because, it's a lot of this is primarily incompetence on part of the German government. The German government can't build houses or make sure that the conditions are there that people in general can find affordable housing in Germany. It's not much different in many places in the United States. So, but then on top of that, you all of a sudden have all that open housing that was there, is basically rented by the government in order to house refugees.
Mm-hmm.
I think a better argument might be like versus saying like comparing like absolute morality to say like, look, like as a citizen of any nation state, right? Like we have contracts, right? A social contract, whether or not it's like an official one or kind of like a theoretical one, right? The nation state has like a social contract with like the individual, at least in a democratic society, right? Like Germany is a democratic society, it might be different in like North Korea or something. But like that social contract is what it is. And like by basically like lowering my rights, right? Like, but if you say like open the borders, let everyone in, screw everyone over, right? Like you're saying like you're violating your end of the social, or you being the state, sorry, violate your end of the social contract, right? Without me having any kind of say into it. And that is a fundamental, that is the problem. Right? I think that makes more sense than trying to compare like, oh, well, okay, you know, like barista versus, you know, or like, you know, like German citizen versus Afghan citizen. Like there's a violation of social contract there. And you change the terms unilaterally.
Well, again, I try to play devil's advocate here, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily my actual position that.
Oh yeah, no. I just think it's a stronger argument because otherwise you get into sort of relative.
No, that was a good one. I do think, and now I'm playing the other side. I think we have a huge moral responsibility, and every citizen in wealthy states has nations has a responsibility to also. Pressure their governments to make sure that they improve the conditions of other countries, so that we don't, that people, hundreds and thousands of and millions of people don't feel forced to leave their homes, which they love. I think still dearly. I mean, home is one of the most essential things in human life, right? And sometimes maybe not, okay, but I think in most cases, people don't want to trek for thousands of miles through the Amazonas jungle or whatever jungle, or go on a lifeboat across the Mediterranean. So I think we are very much responsible for a lot of those conditions. I mean, look at the refugee countries in the case of Europe, right? It was Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Those were all like basically conflicts we were responsible for predominantly, right? And ISIS was basically came out of the Iraq conflict because we screwed that one up, or you know, the Iraqi. But anyway, so I think
how far does that?
Yeah.
What's that? How far does that go? I mean, even in Germany, Germany was a colonial power when? A long time ago.
Yeah.
Are Germans responsible for African refugees?
I think Belgium might be. They were kind of pretty terrible.
Belgium, but Germans. Are Germans? I mean, I don't French, maybe Britain. I don't know, but I don't know what you do with responsibility.
No. I think you're like trying to connect it directly to the historic guilt. I'm not talking about the guilt. I think we're responsible to better the lives of people anywhere. Doesn't matter.
Worldwide.
Yes.
Worldwide.
That's we're all humans. Here's the thing. Here's the reason why. Because there is so much poverty and there are so many conflicts. My opinion is we cannot take all the refugees. Most of those refugees never make it to our borders anyways. The ones who really need the help will never make it to our borders because they're too weak, they're too poor, they're starving, and the ones who make it here, they're already the ones who don't need really our help there. So yes, we're not doing a good job of that, but that would be my utopia. Of course, it's a utopia. But
it becomes a freeloader problem, right? Because like then America be like, oh, Germany's gonna do the refugee thing. That's fantastic, right? We're gonna do America first. You want to come to South America? No problem. We'll give you a ticket to Germany. Good luck. Like you have this freeloader problem. And I don't know how you solve that. Like, unless
there's I don't know the free rider problem, but the Marshall Plan that was like the idea. Marshall Plan for the Americas, Marshall Plan for the world, like essentially massive infrastructure projects around the world to make it such that people would never want to leave where they live now. Right? Yeah. That'd be a big deal.
I mean, we know how it's going to be solved, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to talk to ChatGPT.
I mean, it's just, I guess we're going to wait till something breaks and we're going to slap something that'll work for like 30 or 40 years. And then like, we'll have some future generation will be having this discussion of how stupid we all were for putting this in place, and
yes,
cycle will repeat.
Well, all right. I think we'll leave it here. I think the one thing I want to say in lieu of a conclusion is I think this conversation, which was a lot more difficult, I think, than the previous one, showed how intricate, how difficult this issue really is. It's a very, very complicated issue. And I think the primary lesson, if there is one here, is that people shouldn't judge so quickly when it comes to issues of immigration. Ideally, they wouldn't judge quickly about other people in general. Immigrants, none, we're all human beings. I actually like that one. But unfortunately, we do live in a world that doesn't behave like this a lot. The other issue is that, or final word is basically, yes, politicians are using immigrants and the immigration issue as a play ball. It's a very, very good topic for them to use before elections come up. And I would add, I'm more convinced than ever that both sides are very, very good at that. It doesn't matter left or right. And depending on what suits them best, it's pro or against immigration. And this is maybe the biggest tragedy of this issue, because it's human lives that are at stake. People and anybody who's living in a small town and has never met somebody else, or people in big cities who can also do that. We can all be bigots, should keep that in mind, right? So thank you both for the conversation, and thank you for bearing with us, and we'll see you next time.